That morning I checked my account. $450K was gone. Then came the message. Thanks for the house and the car. This morning I checked my bank balance online. A string of red numbers stared back at me. Negative $450,000. For a moment the world tilted on its axis. It had to be a mistake, a glitch in the system. And then my phone buzzed with a text message that made my blood run cold. Thanks for the house and the car, Mom. I just smiled. A slow, chilling smile that didn't reach my eyes. My dear daughter had no idea whose credit card that really was. The next day she would be crying at my door. My name is Carolyn. I'm 67 years old, and I've always believed I'd seen it all. I've weathered recessions, navigated personal loss, and built a life from scratch. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the quiet horror of waking up to discover my own daughter had stolen nearly $500,000 from me while I slept. Diana, or Jessica as I renamed her, was always meant to be my everything. I adopted her when she was 3 years old. She was a tiny, fragile thing with enormous haunted eyes, the sole survivor of a car accident that had claimed both her biological parents. I first saw her in a sterile room at the foster agency, clutching a threadbare teddy bear, not crying, just vacant. In that moment I made a silent vow. I would fill that emptiness. I would give her everything. And I did. I gave her my youth, watching from the sidelines as my friends traveled the world and climbed their respective career ladders. I gave her my marriage. My husband, a good man named Robert, had wanted children of his own, but my singular, all-consuming focus on this traumatized little girl created a rift between us that time could never heal. He saw a child who needed a firm hand. I saw a broken bird who needed mending. He left when Jessica was 7. I gave her my dreams, shelving my ambitions of becoming a CPA to work a series of jobs that offered flexibility over fulfillment. Cleaning offices, waitressing, bookkeeping for small businesses. Anything that allowed me to be there for every school play and every scraped knee. All of it for her. When I got home that morning, my hands still trembling from the stark, clinical numbers I'd seen on the bank's computer screen, Jessica was in the living room with her husband, Kevin. They were sitting on my worn floral sofa, a relic from a time when my biggest financial worry was the electric bill. Both of them wore a smirk that made a knot of acid form in my stomach. It was a smile of triumph, of smug superiority, as if they had just pulled off the heist of the century and I was the clueless old woman they'd so cleverly outsmarted. Mom, I have to tell you something, Jessica said, her voice laced with a false, bubbly excitement. She was fiddling with a key fob, the sleek logo of a luxury German car brand glinting under the dim living room light. Kevin and I bought a house. She jumped up, her face a mask of manufactured joy. A beautiful house, she continued, her eyes shining with a light I hadn't seen in years. It has a huge yard and 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, not like this tiny one. Everything I ever dreamed of having. I felt a strange, unnerving calm settle over me. The kind of quiet that precedes a hurricane. And where did you get the money for that, Jessica? I asked, my voice steady, almost serene. Too calm. Well, Kevin cleared his throat, puffing out his chest as if he'd personally earned every cent. We used your card. Jess said it was money you'd saved up for us, for our future. After all your hard work, we figured it was only fair that you help us get started. How convenient. How perfectly, cruelly calculated. For months my daughter had been siphoning money from me in small increments, little amounts she thought a forgetful old woman wouldn't notice. 1,000 here for car repairs, 2,000 there for a dental emergency. But this time she'd gone for the grand prize. $450,000 in a single devastating transaction. Jessica, I said, my voice still even, betraying none of the inferno raging inside me. Do you know which account you took that money from? She shrugged, a gesture of casual indifference that cut me deeper than any angry word could have. From your savings account, Mom. The one you've had for years. The one you use for the house, for groceries, for everything. She let out a little laugh, a sound that shattered the last remaining pieces of my heart. Honestly, I didn't know you had that much stashed away. You're always complaining about barely making ends meet. Yeah, Kevin added, leaning forward with an accusatory look. Jess told me you were living pension check to pension check, that you barely had enough for food. Turns out you were rich all along and didn't tell us a thing. Why would you lie to us like that? It's kind of messed up. I just stood there, absorbing their words, looking at them. These two young people, so confident, so proud of their little scheme. They had no idea what they had done. They didn't know the first thing about me. For years, I had meticulously built a wall between my personal life and my professional one. Jessica truly believed her mother was a poor old woman who cleaned offices for a living because that's the job I had when she was young. I never told her when I finally got my accounting degree at night school. I never told her about the commercial properties I began to acquire. I never told her about the investment portfolio I managed with a hawk's eye. And I certainly never told her about the logistics company Translogistics that I had built from the ground up with my own 2 hands, a company that now employed 20 people. Do you think it's okay to steal from your mother? I finally asked, the question hanging in the air, heavy and sharp. It's not stealing. Jessica shot back, standing up, her posture instantly defensive. It's using what's rightfully mine. After everything I've had to put up with, living in this old house, wearing second-hand clothes, pretending we were poor when you had all this money hidden away. Everything you've had to put up with? I repeated slowly, letting the words sink in. You mean like when I worked 3 jobs to pay for your entire college tuition so you wouldn't graduate with a mountain of debt? Or when I sold my own car, the only reliable transportation I had, to buy you that green silk prom dress you said you couldn't live without? Or maybe, I gestured toward Kevin, when I took out a second mortgage on this very house to pay for your wedding because you insisted on having the perfect day. That's different, Kevin mumbled, looking down at his shoes. That was your obligation as a mother. My obligation. As if being a mother was a lifelong debt I had to keep paying, a blank check she could cash whenever her entitlement flared up. Jessica walked right up to me, her face inches from mine, her eyes shining with a cruelty she had learned to mask so well over the years. Look, Mom, it's done. The house is in our name. The car too. You can't turn back time. And honestly, after all these years of your little poverty act, I think we deserve this. Poverty act? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yes. She crossed her arms, her chin jutting out. Always crying about not having money, about how hard life was, how you had to work so much. But you had almost $500,000 just sitting there. Do you know how humiliating that was for me? Do you know how many times I was embarrassed to bring friends over to this dump because I thought we had nothing? Kevin nodded vigorously. Jessica suffered a lot because of you, always feeling like she was less than everyone else. Now she can finally have what she deserves. What she deserves. After lying, after stealing, after treating me like an inconvenient footnote in her life story. I took a deep, steadying breath. All right, I said finally. Enjoy the house. Enjoy the car. Jessica blinked, visibly thrown off by my lack of hysterics. Really? You're not going to make a scene? Call the police. No, I smiled, a real smile this time, though I'm sure it looked terrifying. I just hope it's worth it. And it was true. I did hope it was worth it. Because what Jessica didn't know, what neither of them could possibly comprehend, was that the account they had so gleefully emptied wasn't my personal savings. It was my company's operating account. An account that was audited monthly. An account protected by insurance and a team of corporate lawyers. And above all, an account that was a registered business asset, making any unauthorized withdrawal not just a family betrayal, but a federal crime. By the next day they would be crying at my door. But this time I wasn't going to open it. That night sleep was an impossibility. It wasn't sadness that kept me awake, but a cold hard rage that was burning in the pit of my stomach. I lay awake in my quiet house, the house I had mortgaged for her wedding, and replayed every sacrifice, every skipped vacation, every patched up pair of shoes, every lonely night I'd spent studying accounting after a full day of cleaning offices just to build a better life for her. When I adopted her, she was a scared little girl who would wake up screaming from nightmares of twisting metal and shattering glass. I held her, I soothed her, and I promised her she would never want for anything. And I kept that promise. When I finally managed to open my small logistics company, I made the conscious decision to keep it a secret. I wanted Jessica to have a normal childhood, to learn the value of work, to not be defined by money. How naive I was. I hadn't raised a hardworking, appreciative daughter. I had raised a resentful, entitled stranger who saw my struggles as her personal humiliation. The next morning my phone rang precisely at 8 a.m. It was Arthur, my lawyer and accountant for the past 20 years. His voice was all business, but I could hear the undercurrent of concern. Carolyn, we have a serious problem. Someone withdrew $450,000 from the Translogistics operating account yesterday. The bank has flagged it as a highly unusual transaction, and they need authorization before they can close out the monthly report. I know, Arthur, I said, my voice like steel. It was my daughter. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line, then a deep sigh. Carolyn, you know what this means. That account is a registered business asset. It's not personal funds. Any unauthorized withdrawal constitutes embezzlement. It's a federal crime. I know, I replied calmly. What do you need me to do? First, you need to come to the office and sign an affidavit. We need to formally document everything. Second, I have to ask this as your friend. Do you want to proceed legally? Or should we try to recover the money privately? For a moment I hesitated. The image of a 3-year-old girl with haunted eyes flashed in my mind. She was my daughter. The little girl I taught to ride a bike. The teenager I'd comforted after her first heartbreak. But then I remembered her triumphant smirk, her cruel words, the casual way she dismissed a lifetime of my love. Proceed legally, Arthur, I said, my voice firm. It's time Jessica learned that actions have consequences. That afternoon, driving to Arthur's office in my sensible 10-year-old sedan, I took a detour. I drove through the elegant tree-lined streets of the neighborhood where Jessica had bought her new house, Willow Creek. It was beautiful, a white colonial with huge windows, and a shiny new red sports car parked in the driveway. I pulled over across the street and watched for a few minutes. Jessica was in the yard, kneeling in a flower bed, wearing an expensive-looking yellow sundress. Kevin came out of the house with a beer in his hand, wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they both laughed, looking so happy, so proud of the life they had built on my stolen money. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor and drove away. The image burned into my mind. At Arthur's office, the truth was even worse than I had initially thought. He had pulled all the statements from the past year. The withdrawal started 6 months ago, he said, his face grim. Small amounts at first. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. How did she even get access? Arthur asked, shuffling through bank statements. I gave her a supplementary card years ago for college emergencies, I said, feeling a fresh wave of foolishness wash over me. It was supposed to be for a broken-down car or a medical bill. I checked the statements, but the amounts were small. I assumed they were legitimate expenses. She was always so good at creating a story. Carolyn, Arthur said, pushing a final summary across the desk. His finger tapped on the bottom line. The total stolen over these 6 months comes to $580,000. Not just the $450 from yesterday. She has been systematically draining your operating funds. $580,000. Money I needed to make payroll for my 20 employees. Money for fuel for my trucks. Money for insurance for suppliers. Jessica hadn't just stolen from me. She had stolen from Rosalia in accounting, a single mother of 2. She had stolen from Mike, my best driver, who was saving for his son's college education. She had stolen from all of their families. What happens now? I asked, my voice hollow. We filed the official report with the authorities today. The bank freezes all transactions linked to that card immediately. And since she used the stolen funds to purchase traceable assets, real estate and a vehicle, we can file for the immediate seizure of both as evidence of the crime. How long will that take? If all goes well, Arthur said, picking up the phone to call the bank's fraud department, we should have the court orders by tomorrow afternoon. Jessica is about to find out she robbed the wrong person. That night I couldn't bear to be in my own house, with its memories and ghosts. I checked into the Emperor Hotel, the most elegant in the city, and booked the presidential suite. If I was going to plan my counterattack, I was going to do it in style, surrounded by the kind of luxury I had earned but had always denied myself. From the panoramic window I could see the entire glittering cityscape I had built my life in. All while my daughter thought I was scrubbing toilets for a living. My phone rang. It was Jessica, her voice bright and cheerful. Mom, where are you? I came by to show you pictures of the new house, but you're not here. I'm busy, I replied, my voice cool. Busy with what? Cleaning offices this late. She laughed, the sound grating on my nerves. Mom, you don't have to work so hard anymore. Now that we know you have money saved up, you can relax a little. Maybe take a vacation. Jessica, I have a question for you. Did you ever stop to wonder where the money you stole came from? There was a pause. I didn't steal anything, she said, her voice turning defensive again. I used money that was rightfully mine. Money you were hiding from me my whole life. And what if I told you that money wasn't mine to hide? What are you talking about? What if I told you, I said, savoring the words, that you just committed a federal crime? She laughed, but it was a nervous, brittle sound. Mom, stop being so dramatic. It's your money, your card. There's no crime. You'll find out tomorrow, I said, and hung up the phone. The next morning Arthur called me bright and early. We have the orders. The agents are on their way to the house as we speak. They're also dispatching a team to impound the car. What's going to happen to her? She'll be served with a court summons in a few hours. Depending on whether she cooperates, she could face between 5 and 10 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. Plus, she'll have to pay back every cent, with interest and penalties. 5 to 10 years. The words hung in the air. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of a mother's pain. But then I remembered her words. It's your obligation as a mother. I remembered her triumphant smile. I remembered the years of disrespect. Jessica had chosen this path. Now she would have to walk it to the end. At precisely 11 a.m., my phone began to explode. Calls and texts, one after another, a frantic cascade of panic. I didn't answer, but I read the messages as they flooded in. Mom, answer the phone right now. What have you done? The police are here. They took our car. Mom, please call me. I'm desperate. You are a terrible mother. How could you do this to me? And then finally the one I was waiting for. Mom, I'm sorry. Please, let's fix this. Each message was a symphony of her perfect world crumbling into dust. She had finally understood. She hadn't robbed her dotty old mother. She had robbed a corporation. She had played with fire and gotten horrifically burned. But I was just getting started. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went shopping. I drove my modest sedan to the most exclusive mall in the city. The one Jessica always dreamed of, but could never afford. I walked into the most expensive boutique, and I chose an elegant black dress, Italian leather shoes, and a handbag that cost more than Jessica earned in 3 months at her receptionist job. When the young saleswoman saw my platinum business card, the Translogistics corporate card, her demeanor shifted instantly from polite to reverential. Ma'am, would you like us to show you our private collection? She asked with a perfect, practiced smile. Of course, I replied. After all, I have a reason to celebrate. While I was trying on clothes worth more than the car Jessica had bought with my stolen money, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. I finally turned it off. I needed peace to plan my next move. When I left the mall, transformed and feeling more powerful than I had in years, I decided to drive to the real estate office where Jessica had bought the house. It was a prestigious agency in the financial district, the same one where I had purchased 3 commercial properties over the last 5 years. I walked in, my new look turning heads, and asked to speak with the agent who had handled Jessica's sale. A young, ambitious man named Cody greeted me in his glass-walled office. How can I help you, ma'am? He asked, clearly impressed by my presence. I understand you sold a house in the Willow Creek subdivision yesterday to a young woman named Jessica Williams. I'm her mother. Cody smiled, a wide, self-satisfied grin. Ah yes, a very successful sale. Your daughter and son-in-law are thrilled with their new home. They paid in full. Almost $500,000. A very clean transaction. I can imagine, I said calmly. Did they happen to mention where they got the money? Well, they said it was a family inheritance. Your daughter mentioned you had been saving for years to help them start their life together. Cody seemed proud to have facilitated such a beautiful, heartwarming family story. How interesting, I murmured. And when the bank contacts you to inform you that the money was in fact stolen, what's going to happen to the sale? The color drained from Cody's face. He looked like he'd been slapped. Excuse me. The money they used to buy that house was stolen from a corporate account. Money that did not belong to them. The transaction is going to be voided and the house has been seized by federal agents as evidence in a criminal investigation. Cody started to stammer. But they said they had all the paperwork. The wire transfer went through without a problem. Of course it did. It was my money. I stood up, smoothing down my new dress. They just didn't have authorization to use it. Your agency has just facilitated the purchase of a property with stolen funds. I do hope you have a good legal department. I left the office, leaving Cody completely pale, no doubt already dialing his supervisors to report the impending disaster. My next stop was the dealership where Jessica had bought the car. It was a luxury imported car agency, and the manager, an older man named Gene, recognized me immediately from my corporate dealings. Mrs. Miller, what a surprise to see you here. Are you finally going to buy that Mercedes I recommended last year? Hello, Gene. I'm here on a different matter. Yesterday you sold a car to my daughter Jessica Williams. A red BMW. Ah yes. A lovely young woman. Very excited about her purchase. Paid $65,000 in cash. Said it was a gift from her very successful entrepreneur mother. Gene smiled. I'm so glad to hear you finally told your family about your company. I always found it odd that you kept your success such a secret. Yes, well, family secrets sometimes come to light in the most unexpected ways, I said. The problem, Gene, is that she didn't have authorization to use that money. It was stolen from my business account. Gene's friendly smile vanished instantly. Are you saying? I'm saying your dealership just sold a car with stolen money. The vehicle has already been impounded. I hope you've kept all the transaction paperwork, because the authorities are going to need it for their investigation. Gene stood up abruptly. Mrs. Miller, we had no idea. The transaction seemed completely legal. I know, Gene, you're not at fault. But you will have to cooperate. As I left the dealership, I saw Gene was already on the phone, his face a mask of panic. Jessica hadn't just ruined her own life. She had dragged innocent businesses and people into her web of deceit. My phone, which I had turned back on, had 53 missed calls and 26 text messages. Jessica was desperate. The messages had evolved from rage to pleading. Mom, please pick up the phone. It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know it was a company account. The lawyers say I could go to jail. Mom, help me, please. I'll give it all back. I'm your daughter. How can you destroy my life like this? But the last message was different. It was from Kevin. Mrs. Miller, we need to talk. Jessica is having a panic attack. The lawyers told us this is very serious. Please, can we handle this as a family? We don't want to go to trial. Panic attack. After 24 years of treating me like her personal maid, after celebrating the ruin of my life, Jessica was having a panic attack because there were finally consequences for her actions. I decided to answer that message. Kevin, you should have thought about the consequences before you helped her spend the money. It's too late for family arrangements now. His reply came in seconds. Please, ma'am. Jessica didn't know it was a company account. She thought it was your personal money. It was an innocent mistake. An innocent mistake. Stealing $580,000 over 6 months was an innocent mistake. Kevin, an innocent mistake is using the wrong card at the grocery store. Stealing over $500,000 to buy a house and a luxury car is a premeditated crime. Jessica knew exactly what she was doing. But she's your daughter, ma'am. Your own adopted daughter. How can you send her to jail? There it was. The adoption card. The emotional low blow they knew would hurt me, reminding me that Jessica wasn't my biological child. As if that meant I had less right to expect respect and honesty from her. Kevin, it's precisely because she is my adopted daughter, because I chose her, because I gave her all my love in my entire life, that her betrayal hurts so much more. A biological child might disappoint you by accident. An adopted child who steals from you is a knife straight to the heart. There was no reply after that. That night from my hotel suite, I called Arthur for a full report. The seizure orders were executed successfully, he said. The house is sealed and the car is in the judicial impound lot. Jessica and Kevin had to leave the property with only what they could carry in a suitcase. Where are they now? As far as we know, they're staying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. Jessica has hired a public defender. Her first hearing is the day after tomorrow. What are her chances? Carolyn, let's be honest. With all the evidence we have, it's almost impossible for her to avoid prison. The only way out would be if you drop the charges, and they reach a private settlement for restitution. And if I don't drop the charges? Between 5 and 10 years in a federal prison, plus full restitution, plus fines and interest. Her life as she knows it is over. 5 to 10 years. My daughter, the little girl I had raised since she was 3, could spend the next decade of her life in prison for stealing from me. Did it hurt? Of course it hurt. But what also hurt was every cruel word she had said to me. Every time she had treated me like trash. Every moment she had celebrated destroying my life. Arthur, I said finally, my voice resolved. Proceed with everything. Jessica needs to learn that decisions have consequences. And I need to learn to stop protecting people who are determined to hurt me. The next day, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Susan, my younger sister, who lived in another city and with whom I rarely spoke. Carolyn, Jessica called me crying. She told me what's happening. Is it true you're going to send her to jail? Jessica stole $580,000 from my company, Susan. I'm not the one sending her to jail. She is the one who put herself in this situation. But she's your daughter. Susan sounded desperate. You raised her from a baby. How can you be so cold? Cold. I repeated slowly. Susan, do you know how many times Jessica told me I was a burden to her? Do you know how many times she made me feel like I owed her something just for existing? She robbed me, celebrated robbing me, and now that there are consequences, I'm the bad guy. But you can drop the charges. You can forgive her. And then what? She robs me again in 6 months? She keeps treating me like garbage because she knows there will never be consequences. My voice was breaking, not from sadness, but from years of suppressed rage. Susan, Jessica never respected me. She never valued anything I did for her. To her, I was always just a walking ATM. Carolyn, please. No, I cut her off. For 24 years I gave her everything. I gave up having more children for her. I gave up remarrying for her. I worked day and night to give her everything she wanted. And she repaid me by stealing from me and humiliating me. No more, Susan. It's over. I hung up the phone feeling a strange mix of relief and pain. It was the first time in years I had said out loud everything I had sacrificed for Jessica. Everything I had given up for a daughter who never appreciated it. An hour later, another message from Jessica arrived. This one was different. Longer, more desperate. Mom, I know you're furious with me, and you have every right to be. I know what I did was wrong, but please don't let this destroy our family forever. I'm willing to give back all the money, to work to pay you back for years if I have to, but please don't send me to jail. I won't survive in there. I'm begging you as your daughter, as the little girl you raised, give me a chance to fix this. For the first time in days, Jessica sounded genuinely remorseful. She wasn't blaming me. She wasn't justifying her actions. She wasn't playing the victim. She was admitting her mistake and asking for forgiveness. For a moment my heart softened. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe she had learned her lesson. Maybe. Then I remembered. I remembered the triumphant smile on her face when she told me she had used my money. I remembered how she had celebrated her cleverness in robbing me. I remembered every cruel word, every moment of contempt, every time she had treated me like I was worthless. And I remembered something more important. This hadn't been an impulse. Jessica had been stealing from me for 6 months. She had planned the big heist. She had calculated exactly how much to take to buy the house and the car. It had been methodical, deliberate, and cruel. I replied, Jessica, if you were truly sorry, you wouldn't have stolen from me in the first place. If you truly loved me as a daughter, you wouldn't have celebrated ruining my life. Your remorse only came when you found out there were consequences. That's not real remorse. That's fear. Her response was immediate. Mom, please. I'm young. I made a mistake. Everyone deserves a second chance. Jessica, you had 28 second chances over 6 months. Every time you used my card, you had a chance to stop. Every time you saw the money in your account, you had a chance to return it. Every time you lied to my face about your expenses, you had a chance to confess. You used all of your chances to steal more from me. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. I went to visit my parents' grave. It had been 3 years since I'd been to the cemetery. There were always excuses. Work. Jessica needed something. I didn't have time. I drove to the quiet, peaceful cemetery and sat in front of my mom and dad's headstones. For the first time in years I cried. But I didn't cry for Jessica. I cried for myself. For all the years I had lost being the perfect mother to a daughter who never valued me. For all the opportunities for happiness I had rejected to dedicate myself completely to someone who saw me as an obstacle. Dad, Mom. I spoke aloud to the silent stones. I think I got it wrong. You taught me to love, to give, to sacrifice for family. But you never taught me when to stop. You never taught me that love without respect is abuse. That giving without limits is self-destruction. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees, and for a moment, I felt as if my parents were there, listening. Jessica is going to go to jail, I continued. And I know you would say I should forgive her, that she's my daughter, that family is the most important thing. But I also know that you would never have stolen from me. You would never have treated me with the contempt she has shown me. You would never have celebrated destroying my life. I stayed there until the sun began to set. When I stood up to leave, I felt different. Lighter. As if I had left a heavy 24-year-old burden beside those graves. That night in my hotel suite, Arthur called with an update. Carolyn, Jessica's lawyer, contacted me. He wants to negotiate a plea deal. Jessica is willing to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence and a payment plan for restitution. What kind of reduced sentence? Probably 2 years in prison instead of 5 to 10, plus 5 years of probation during which she would have to pay the full restitution. 2 years. My daughter would spend 2 years in prison. And if we reject the deal, we go to trial where she will likely receive the full sentence. 5 to 10 years with no possibility of early parole. What do you recommend? Legally, the deal is reasonable. It guarantees you full restitution, and Jessica learns a severe lesson but isn't completely destroyed. If we go to trial, there's a small chance a jury might feel sorry for her and reduce the charges, but there's also the chance they'll give her the maximum. How long do I have to decide? Until tomorrow afternoon. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt or sadness, but because I was making the most important decision of my life. A decision that would define not only Jessica's future, but my own. For years, I had been the mother who forgives everything, who accepts any abuse just to keep the family peace. The mother who sacrifices herself to the point of self-destruction for love. But that love had never been returned. That sacrifice had never been valued. Jessica had taught me that unconditional love, when not reciprocated, becomes permitted abuse. That forgiving without consequences isn't kindness, it's cowardice. That being a good mother doesn't mean letting your daughter destroy you. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I made my decision. I sent a message to Arthur. We reject the deal. We're going to trial. Jessica needs to face the full consequences of her actions, and I need to learn to value myself as much as I valued others. The next day, Jessica would learn that her mother had chosen justice over emotional blackmail, that she had chosen respect over the fear of conflict, that she had finally chosen to protect herself instead of the one who was hurting her. For the first time in 24 years, I had chosen Carolyn. The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected. For the 2 weeks leading up to it, Jessica had tried everything to get me to change my mind. Handwritten letters, calls from distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. She even showed up at my translogistics office, trying to get past security to talk to me. That visit had been particularly revealing. Jessica had arrived with Kevin, both dressed in somber black as if attending a funeral, their faces carefully arranged into masks of misunderstood victims. My assistant, Brenda, had warned me they were in reception via the intercom. "Mrs. Miller, there's a young woman here who says she's your daughter. She's very upset and insists on seeing you. Send her in, Brenda," I said. It was time for Jessica to see who her mother really was. When they walked into my executive office, with its panoramic city view, its polished mahogany furniture, and its original paintings on the walls, Jessica froze. Her eyes scanned every detail. The latest computer on my desk, the framed business diplomas on the wall, the photos of me shaking hands with other prominent business leaders at awards ceremonies. This is all yours," she murmured, her mind visibly struggling to process the reality. "Yes, Jessica," I said, leaning back in my leather chair. "This is Translogistics, the company I built over the last 15 years while you believed your mother was a poor cleaning lady." Kevin was also in shock. "Mrs. Miller, we didn't know you were that you had." "That I had what, Kevin? Success? Money? Value beyond being Jessica's maid." I sat up straight, feeling powerful. "For years, I allowed you both to see me as the poor, needy mother. But it turns out you were the poor ones. Poor in spirit. Poor in values. Poor in gratitude." Jessica approached my desk, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom, I didn't know any of this. If I had known you were so successful, I never would have." "Never would have what, Jessica? Never would have stolen from me? Or never would have treated me like garbage?" I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. "The problem isn't that you didn't know how much money I had. The problem is that you thought it was acceptable to steal from me regardless of how much I had. But Mom, now I understand. Now I see I was completely wrong about you. I can change. I can be the daughter you deserve." I turned to look at her directly. "Jessica, do you know the difference between you and me? When I was young and I made mistakes, I learned from them and I changed my behavior. You make mistakes, and you only change when there are consequences you can't avoid." "That's not true," Kevin protested. "Jessica is truly sorry. We've talked a lot about this, and she understands what she did was wrong. Kevin, Jessica has had 24 years to treat me well, 24 years to value my sacrifices, 24 years to show me an ounce of respect." Her remorse arrived at the exact moment she realized she was going to jail. Not a moment sooner. Jessica dropped to her knees beside my desk, literally knelt on the expensive Persian rug. "Mom, I'm begging you. I'm your daughter, the little girl you adopted, raised, and loved. You can't send me to jail. You can't destroy my life like this." "Jessica, get up off the floor," I said, my voice firm and cold. "I will not allow you to use emotional blackmail on me ever again. I am not destroying your life. You destroyed your own life when you decided to steal from me. I am just refusing to be an accomplice in your self-destruction." "But the adoption. Mom, you chose me. You said you loved me as if I were your biological daughter. And I loved you exactly like that, Jessica. But love has limits. Love doesn't mean allowing someone to abuse you indefinitely. Real love includes consequences when someone you love makes destructive choices." Kevin tried to intervene. "Mrs. Miller, we understand you're hurt, but Jessica is family. Family forgives. Family supports each other." "Kevin, for years I was the only one in this family who forgave, who sacrificed, who gave support. Jessica never forgave me a single mistake. She never gave me emotional support. She never sacrificed anything for me. This family was a one-way street where I gave everything and she took everything." Jessica stood up, her face transforming from pleading to pure rage. "You know what, Mom? Maybe you're right. Maybe I wasn't the perfect daughter, but you weren't the perfect mother either. Always working, always worried about money, never emotionally available." There she was, the real Jessica. When pleading didn't work, she went back to her default setting, blaming me. "Jessica, I worked so much precisely to give you everything you wanted. And as for being emotionally available, how many times did I ask about your day, and you grunted an answer? How many times did I try to hug you and you physically pushed me away? How many times did I try to have deep conversations with you, and you told me you were busy? That's different." "No, Jessica, it's exactly the same. The difference is that when you rejected me, I kept trying. When I needed emotional support, you were never available." Kevin took Jessica by the arm. Come on, honey. It's clear she's already decided to destroy you. There's nothing more we can do here. Kevin, I said as they headed for the door. One last thing. She didn't keep my success a secret because she wanted to protect me or give me a normal childhood. She kept me a secret because she was ashamed of me, because the role of the poor victim suited her better than the role of a successful entrepreneur's daughter. Jessica turned at the door, her face pale. That's not true, isn't it? Then explain to me why, when you went to birthday parties for your rich friends from school, you always told them your mother couldn't come because she had to work cleaning? You never invited me because you were ashamed of your adoptive mother, the poor cleaning lady. Jessica didn't answer because she knew it was true. Get out of my office, Jessica. And the next time you want to see me, let it be in court. They left without another word. That afternoon, Arthur called to confirm the trial details. Carolyn, I have to ask you one more time. Are you sure about this? Once the trial starts, there's no going back. Jessica will almost certainly get the full sentence. I'm sure, Arthur. For the first time in years, I'm completely sure of something. All right. The trial starts tomorrow at 9 a.m. The prosecutor is confident. With all the evidence we have, it's practically impossible for Jessica to avoid prison. How much time do you think she'll get? Between 5 and 8 years plus full restitution. Her public defender is young and inexperienced. He doesn't have much to work with. 5 to 8 years. My daughter was going to spend the next 5 to 8 years of her life in prison for stealing from me. That night I stayed awake, thinking about everything that had happened. About the 3-year-old girl I had adopted, scared and vulnerable. About how that girl had grown into a woman who believed she had the right to rob and humiliate me. At what point had I lost my daughter? At what point had Jessica decided her mother was the enemy instead of her ally? Maybe the mistake had been mine from the beginning. Maybe I had been too permissive, too self-sacrificing, too willing to forgive anything. Maybe by shielding her from every hardship, I had raised a narcissist by never setting clear boundaries. But I also knew it was too late to change the past. I could only change the future. And my future no longer included allowing someone to treat me the way Jessica had. No matter how much I loved them. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I got up and prepared for the trial. I chose a conservative, powerful black suit, my simple pearl necklace and comfortable shoes. It was going to be a long day. When I arrived at the courthouse, there were reporters outside. Apparently, the story of the successful businesswoman sending her adopted daughter to jail for theft had caught the media's attention. Mrs. Miller, how do you feel about sending your own daughter to prison? A reporter yelled, shoving a microphone in my face. I stopped, turned, and looked at her directly. I feel like a mother who is finally teaching her daughter that actions have consequences. I said, my voice clear and strong. Something I should have done many years ago. And with that, I walked into the courthouse, ready to finally close this painful chapter of my life. The courtroom was packed, not just with family and onlookers, but with reporters who had turned my family's private pain into public entertainment. Jessica sat at the defense table, dressed in a simple gray suit she had probably borrowed for the occasion. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the arrogant, triumphant woman who had celebrated robbing me. When our eyes met for the first time in weeks, I saw something in them I hadn't seen before. Real fear. Not the manipulative fear she used when she wanted something, but genuine gut-wrenching terror of what was about to happen to her. For a second, just a second, my mother's heart softened. Then I remembered her smile as she said, "Thanks for the house and the car, Mom." And my heart hardened again. The prosecutor, a serious, methodical man named Mr. Davis, presented the case with surgical precision. Every transaction, every withdrawal, every lie was meticulously documented and displayed on a large screen for the jury to see. The evidence was overwhelming. $580,000 stolen over 6 months from a business account to which Jessica only had access for true emergencies. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Davis said in his powerful opening statement, this is not a case of a desperate daughter taking a little money in a family emergency. This is the story of a systematic, calculated, and cruel theft by a woman who stole from her own adoptive mother's company, risking not only Mrs. Miller's personal assets, but the jobs and livelihoods of 20 families who depend on translogistics for their income. Jessica lowered her head when Mr. Davis mentioned the employees. It was something she had probably never considered, that her innocent mistake had had real-world consequences for people other than herself. The public defender, a nervous young man who looked like he was barely out of law school, tried to paint Jessica as a victim of circumstance. He spoke of her tragic childhood as an orphan, of how she had grown up not knowing her mother's true financial status, of how she had misinterpreted the availability of the money. My client, he argued, his voice trembling slightly, grew up believing her mother was a low-income worker who was struggling to make ends meet. When she discovered that money was available, she genuinely thought it was money her mother had been secretly saving for her future. It was a pathetic defense, and everyone in the room knew it. Even if Jessica had believed that, it didn't explain why she had taken the money in secret. It didn't explain why she had lied about the expenses. It didn't explain why she had celebrated deceiving her mother. The first witness was Arthur, my accountant and lawyer. He presented all the financial documentation with the cool precision of a machine. Every number, every date, every unauthorized transaction laid bare. When his testimony was over, it was impossible to deny that Jessica had been systematically stealing for months. The second witness was Brenda, my assistant at Translogistics. She testified about how Jessica had visited the office multiple times over the past few years, always seeing the company's luxuries, but never once asking about her mother's business. Miss Williams seemed uncomfortable every time she came to the office, Brenda testified, as if she didn't want to be there. Mrs. Miller always tried to include her in conversations about the company, but Jessica would always change the subject or say she had to leave. Then came the witnesses that hurt me the most, my employees. One by one, they took the stand and spoke about how Jessica's theft had endangered their jobs. When the operating account was nearly empty, testified Rosalia, my human resources manager, we couldn't make payroll on time. We had to take out an emergency loan from the bank. Several employees thought the company was going bankrupt and started looking for other jobs. Jessica didn't look up during this entire testimony. She was finally understanding that her actions had had real consequences for real people. When it was my turn to testify, I approached the stand, feeling the weight of 24 years of motherhood on my shoulders. Mr. Davis guided me through my history with Jessica. The adoption, the sacrifices I had made, my decision to keep my business success private to give her what I thought would be a normal childhood. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Davis asked, his voice gentle, why did you decide to keep your company a secret from your daughter for so long? I wanted Jessica to have a childhood without the pressure of money. I didn't want her to feel obligated to follow in my footsteps, or for other kids to befriend her just because of her family's wealth. I wanted her to develop her own identity, her own values, based on who she was, not what she had. And how did Jessica react when you occasionally tried to mention your company? She always changed the subject. She seemed uncomfortable or bored. Eventually, I stopped mentioning it because it was clear she wasn't interested. When did you realize that Jessica was stealing money from your business account? The first few small withdrawals I attributed to legitimate expenses. Jessica had used the card for emergencies before. But when I saw the $450,000 withdrawal and received her text message thanking me for the house and the car, I understood that she had been stealing from me systematically. What was your emotional reaction to this discovery? I took a moment to answer. The courtroom completely silent. I felt betrayed, I said, my voice thick with emotion, more deeply than I ever thought possible. Not just because of the money but because of the celebration. Jessica showed no guilt, no remorse. She was proud to have tricked her poor mother. That night, I understood that for years, I had been living with a stranger who saw me as an obstacle to her happiness, not as the mother who had sacrificed everything for her. Did you consider dropping the charges? Yes, I admitted. For days I struggled with that decision. Jessica is my adopted daughter. I love her deeply, but I also understood that if there were no consequences this time, there never would be. Jessica needed to learn that stealing is wrong, no matter who you steal from or why you do it. During the cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to paint me as a cold, vengeful mother. Mrs. Miller, isn't it true that you are sending your adopted daughter to prison out of personal revenge? No, I answered calmly. I am allowing the justice system to do its job. Jessica committed a crime. There are consequences for crimes. My job as a mother is not to protect her from the consequences of her bad decisions, but to teach her to make better ones. But don't you feel any responsibility for Jessica's behavior? For having raised her in a way that led to this? That question hit me hard. It was the question I had been asking myself for weeks. Of course I feel responsibility, I admitted, my voice dropping. I believe I was too permissive. I believe I should have set clearer boundaries from a very young age. I believe my unconditional love became a license for Jessica to disrespect me without consequences. If I had been a stricter mother, perhaps Jessica would have learned stronger values. And you don't think you should give her one last chance to learn those values without going to prison? She already had that chance. She had it for 6 months while she was stealing small amounts. She had it when she decided to steal $450,000 at once. She had it when she celebrated deceiving me. Chances run out when someone uses them only to hurt you more. When I stepped down from the stand, Jessica was looking at me with tears streaming down her face. But they were no longer tears of pleading or manipulation. They were tears of real, dawning understanding. She was finally understanding who her mother was, and what she had lost. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the jury deliberated for only 2 hours. Guilty of first-degree embezzlement. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of unauthorized use of financial instruments. Jessica collapsed in her chair when she heard the verdict. Kevin, who had been sitting in the gallery every day, got up and ran out of the room. The judge scheduled the sentencing for the following week, but we all already knew what it would be. Between 5 and 8 years in a federal prison. As I was leaving the courthouse, Jessica yelled to me from the defense table, her voice raw with despair. Mom, forgive me. Please forgive me. I stopped at the heavy oak doors and turned back to her one last time. I already forgive you, Jessica. But forgiveness doesn't mean avoiding consequences. It means freeing myself from resentment while you learn from your mistakes. And with that, I walked out of the courthouse, feeling for the first time in years that I had done the right thing as a mother. A week after the verdict, sentencing day arrived. The courtroom was even more crowded than it had been during the trial. The media had turned my family's private tragedy into a viral phenomenon. Videos of my statement circulated on social media with sensational headlines like, Entrepreneur Mom Sends Adopted Daughter to Prison for Theft, and The Price of Family and Gratitude. Jessica looked gaunt. A week in the county jail awaiting sentencing had completely changed her appearance. Her normally vibrant blonde hair was dull and lifeless. She had deep dark circles under her eyes, and she had lost a noticeable amount of weight. There was nothing left of the arrogant, triumphant woman who had celebrated stealing from me. The judge, an older man with a reputation for being stern but fair, reviewed all the documents before speaking. Miss Williams, he said, addressing Jessica directly, this court has carefully reviewed your case. The theft of $580,000 over a period of 6 months shows a clear pattern of premeditation, planning, and a systematic escalation in the severity of your actions. Jessica began to tremble visibly. However, the judge continued, I have also considered your circumstances. You are a first-time offender. You have shown some remorse during these proceedings, and this crime was committed against a family member, which suggests deeper emotional issues at play rather than a purely criminal mindset. My heart began to beat faster. Was he going to be more lenient than expected? For the charges of embezzlement and fraud, I sentenced Diana Jessica Williams to 6 years in a federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 4 years for good behavior. Additionally, you must pay full restitution of $580,000, plus interest and legal costs, which amounts to a total of $720,000. Jessica completely collapsed into her chair. Her defense attorney had to hold her up as she sobbed uncontrollably. Furthermore, the judge added, his voice firm, during your period of parole, Miss Williams, you will be prohibited from contacting the victim, Mrs. Carolyn Miller, without express judicial authorization. This restraining order will be in effect for 10 years. 10 years. 10 years without being able to contact me. My daughter couldn't talk to me, visit me, or come near me for a decade. Do you have anything to say before this hearing concludes, Miss Williams? The judge asked. Jessica managed to stand, leaning heavily on the table. Her voice was barely a whisper, but the courtroom microphone picked up every word. Yes, Your Honor. I want to apologize to my mother in front of everyone. Carolyn adopted me when I was an orphan child, and she gave me everything. Literally everything. Her time, her money, her love, her dreams. And I repaid her with cruelty and ingratitude. Tears streamed down her face, real tears this time, not the crocodile tears I had seen so often before. For years I treated her like she was my personal servant, like she owed me something just for existing. I never valued her sacrifices. I never respected her love. And when I found out she had money, my first reaction was to steal it and celebrate having deceived her. The silence in the room was total. Even the reporters had stopped writing. Mom! Jessica looked directly at me, her eyes filled with a pain that was finally devastatingly real. I know it's too late. I know I destroyed our relationship forever. But I want you to know that now I understand everything you did for me. I understand what I lost. I understand that you weren't my enemy. You were my greatest protector, and I was too blind and too cruel to see it. Her voice broke completely. If I could turn back time, I would change everything. I would treat you with the respect you always deserved. I would value every sacrifice you made. I would love you the way you loved me. But it's too late for that. I can only hope that someday when I get out of prison, you can find in your heart a small space to forgive the daughter who failed you so completely. She sat down and continued to weep silently. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Miller, do you wish to make a statement? I stood up slowly. For weeks I had thought about this moment, about what I would say to Jessica if I ever had the chance. Your Honor, I began, my voice clear and steady. For 24 years I was the mother who forgave everything, who accepted any abuse, who sacrificed everything just to keep the family peace. I thought unconditional love meant love without limits, love without consequences, a love that allows any behavior just so you don't lose the person you love. I looked directly at Jessica. But that kind of love isn't real love. It's codependency disguised as kindness. It's fear disguised as generosity. For years I allowed Jessica to disrespect me because I was terrified of losing her love. But what I didn't understand is that respect that is lost without consequences can never turn into real love. My voice grew stronger with conviction. Jessica, I love you. I will always love you. You are my adopted daughter, the little girl I chose to love when you were 3 years old. But loving you doesn't mean letting you destroy me. Loving you means doing the hard thing when it's necessary, even if it means setting boundaries that hurt. I paused, taking a moment to control the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. I accept your apology. I believe you finally understand what you've lost. But apologies don't erase actions. Remorse doesn't eliminate consequences. You are going to prison not because I am a cruel mother, but because decisions have outcomes, and you made decisions that led to this outcome. Jessica cried silently as I spoke. I hope you use these years in prison to become the woman you always had the potential to be. The woman who values the people who love her. The woman who understands that gratitude is not weakness, but strength. The woman who knows that respect is the foundation of any real relationship. I took a deep breath before finishing. And when you get out of prison, if you have truly changed, if you have truly learned these values, maybe we can rebuild some kind of relationship. But it will be a different relationship. One based on mutual respect. Not on my fear of losing you and your certainty that you can treat me badly without consequences. I sat down, feeling as if I had closed a chapter of my life that had been open for far too long. The judge banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. Miss Williams will be transferred to the assigned federal institution within the next 2 weeks. As Jessica was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. In her eyes there was no longer pleading or manipulation. There was only a profound, genuine sadness, and for the first time in years real respect for me. I walked out of the courthouse, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, but I didn't answer any of them. I had more important things to do. That afternoon, I drove straight to Translogistics. I had a company to run, employees who depended on me, and a life to rebuild. For the first time in 24 years, I was going to live for myself unapologetically. Brenda greeted me at the office with a hug. Mrs. Miller, we all saw the news. How are you feeling? I feel free, Brenda, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. And it was true. The weight of 2 decades of codependent motherhood had lifted from my shoulders. I no longer had to walk on eggshells to avoid Jessica's anger. I no longer had to justify every decision in my life to someone who saw me as her enemy. I no longer had to live in fear of disappointing a daughter who had never valued anything I did for her. Jessica was going to spend the next 4 to 6 years in prison, and I was going to spend that time rediscovering who Carolyn was when she wasn't just being the mother of an ungrateful daughter. For the first time in decades, the future looked bright. 6 months after Jessica's sentencing, my life had changed more than I ever could have imagined. Without the constant, draining drama of dealing with her ingratitude and manipulation, Translogistics was thriving like never before. We had won 3 major new contracts, expanded our team to 30 employees, and opened a second office in the next city over. But the most significant change wasn't professional. It was personal. For the first time in 24 years, I was living for myself. I had sold the old house where I had lived with Jessica. It was too big for me alone, and filled with too many painful memories. Instead, I bought a modern penthouse in the city center, with a panoramic view of the skyline, and all the luxuries I had always denied myself because I felt I had to save everything for Jessica's future. I had also started doing things I had never allowed myself to do before. I took painting classes on Tuesday nights. I finally took that trip to Europe I had postponed for years. I went to dinners at fancy restaurants without feeling a pang of guilt about spending money unnecessarily. It was as if I had woken up from a 2-decade-long dream where my only identity had been Jessica's mother. One Friday afternoon, while I was reviewing some financial reports in my office, Brenda knocked on the door. Mrs. Miller, there's someone here to see you. He says his name is Kevin, your daughter's ex-husband. My stomach tightened immediately. What does he want? He didn't say. Just that it's urgent, and he needs to talk to you about Jessica. I hesitated for a moment. The restraining order only applied to Jessica, not to Kevin. But I had no desire to speak with him either. Send him in, I finally decided. But stay close in case I need you to call security. Kevin walked into my office looking completely different from the arrogant, smug man who had celebrated robbing me just a few months ago. He had lost weight, he had deep, dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes looked cheap and worn. The luxuries bought with my stolen money had clearly vanished from his life. Mrs. Miller, thank you for seeing me, he said, his voice trembling slightly. What do you want, Kevin? I have a company to run. It's about Jessica. She's not doing well in prison. They've transferred her 3 times because she's having problems with the other inmates. She's losing weight, she's not sleeping, and the psychologists say she's developing severe depression. And what do you want me to do about it? Visit her. Talk to her. You're the only real family she has. I can't help her anymore. What does that mean? Kevin lowered his head in shame. I filed for divorce last week. I can't stay married to someone who's in prison for theft. My family pressured me. My friends turned their backs on me. I lost my job when they found out what happened. My life was completely destroyed by being associated with Jessica. Interesting. When Jessica had stolen nearly $500,000, Kevin was happy to be her accomplice. But when the consequences arrived, he abandoned her immediately. Kevin, does that feeling seem familiar to you? The feeling of someone who is supposed to love you abandoning you when things get tough. He looked at me confused. For years, Jessica abandoned me emotionally. Every time I needed support, every time I had problems, every time I felt alone, every time I needed my daughter, she wasn't available. But I never abandoned her. I never filed for divorce from being her mother. I was always there, no matter how she treated me. But ma'am, this is different. No, Kevin, it's exactly the same. The difference is that when Jessica treated me badly, I kept loving her unconditionally. When Jessica faces the consequences of her actions, you abandon her immediately. Which one of us truly loved her? Kevin didn't know what to say. Do you know what I find most interesting about your visit? I continued, my voice calm and analytical. You didn't come here because you love Jessica and you want to help her. You came here because you feel guilty for abandoning her. And you want me to do the emotional work that you don't want to do. That's not it, ma'am. I really do care about Jessica. If you really cared about Jessica, you wouldn't have filed for divorce while she's at her most vulnerable. You wouldn't expect her mother, whom she robbed and humiliated, to clean up the emotional mess that you don't want to handle. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had conquered. Kevin, for 24 years, I was the person who was always available to clean up Jessica's emotional messes. The one who always forgave, who always gave second chances, who was always there no matter how she treated me. And do you know what I learned? What? That when you're the person who always forgives, you become the person who always gets hurt. When you're the person who has no boundaries, you become the person everyone crosses. When you're the person who always rescues others from the consequences of their actions, you become the person who prevents them from ever growing and maturing. I turned to face him directly. Jessica is in prison not because she's a bad person deep down, but because she never had to face real consequences for her bad decisions. Every time she did something hurtful or destructive, I rescued her. Every time she needed to learn a difficult lesson, I made it easy for her. Every time she should have felt guilt or remorse, I absorbed those emotions for her. But she's really suffering now, ma'am. Yes, Kevin. Now she is really suffering. And that suffering is exactly what she needs to become a better person. If I rescue her now, if I go running to comfort her and make her life easier, I will be taking away her only chance to truly grow. Kevin looked desperate. But she's your daughter, ma'am. Your own adopted daughter. It's precisely because she is my adopted daughter, because I chose to love her when she was 3 years old, that I have a responsibility to make sure she becomes a good person. And sometimes, being a good parent means allowing your child to suffer the consequences of their decisions, even when it breaks your heart to see them suffer. So you're not going to visit her? You're not going to talk to her? The restraining order prohibits me from contacting Jessica for 10 years. But even if that order didn't exist, I wouldn't visit her. Not yet. Jessica needs these years to reflect on her actions, to develop real empathy, to learn to value the people who love her. If I show up running to rescue her the first time things get tough, I will have wasted this entire, painful opportunity for her to grow. Kevin stood up to leave, clearly frustrated that he hadn't gotten what he wanted. One last thing, Kevin, I said as he headed for the door. The next time someone abandons you when things get difficult, I want you to remember this moment. And maybe you'll understand a little better what I lived through for 24 years with Jessica. He left without another word. That night, for the first time since the sentencing, I allowed myself to cry for Jessica. I didn't cry out of guilt or regret for my decisions, but out of genuine pain for what we had lost. I cried for the mother-daughter relationship we never had. I cried for the years I had wasted trying to earn her love and respect. I cried for the wonderful woman Jessica could have been if she had learned stronger values from a young age. But I also cried with relief. Relief at finally being free from a toxic relationship that had consumed me for decades. Relief at having found the courage to prioritize myself. Relief at having broken the cycle of emotional abuse that had defined my motherhood. When I finished crying, I felt clean, as if I had washed away the last remnants of guilt and codependency left in my system. The next day, I made a decision I had been postponing for months. I legally changed my last name. I was no longer Carolyn Williams, the name I had taken when I adopted Jessica. I was now, and forever, simply Carolyn Miller. Successful entrepreneur. Independent woman. A whole person all on my own. Jessica had 4 more years of prison ahead of her. 4 years to grow, to reflect, to become the woman she always had the potential to be. And I had the rest of my life to be happy. For years after the trial, I received a letter I wasn't expecting. The return address read, Jessica Williams, Federal Correctional Institution. She had been released on parole for good behavior, exactly as the judge had predicted. Over those 4 years, I had built a completely new life. Translogistics now had offices in 3 cities and over 50 employees. I had written a book about my experience called Love with Limits. Why Setting Boundaries is the Greatest Act of Love, which had, to my astonishment, become a national bestseller. I also started giving lectures at business schools and women's groups on toxic family relationships and codependency. But the most significant change had been personal. At 71, I had learned to live for myself without apology. I had an active social life, hobbies I was passionate about, and for the first time in decades, real deep peace of mind. Jessica's letter was different from anything I had ever received from her before. There were no pleas, no manipulation, no excuses. It was a letter from a mature woman who had clearly done a tremendous amount of work on her personal growth. Dear Mom, it began. I know the restraining order prohibits me from contacting you directly, but my parole officer helped me get permission to send this one letter through official channels. I don't expect a response, or forgiveness, or reconciliation. I just needed you to know what these 4 years have been like for me. The first few months in prison were the hardest of my life. Not just because of the physical conditions, but because for the first time I had no escape. I couldn't blame you. I couldn't distract myself with shopping or parties. I couldn't manipulate anyone into solving my problems. I was completely alone with my thoughts and my actions. For the first year, I kept blaming you. I kept believing you were a cruel mother who had ruined my life out of revenge. But the mandatory therapy began to show me things about myself I had never wanted to see. My therapist, a wonderful woman named Patricia, asked me a question that changed everything. Can you remember any time in your adult life, she asked, when you did something genuinely sacrificial for your mother? I tried to answer her for weeks. I searched my memory for any moment when I had put your needs before mine, when I had done something difficult just to make you happy, when I had sacrificed something important to me for your well-being. I couldn't find a single example. That realization destroyed me. I realized that for 24 years, I had been a daughter who only took and never gave. A daughter who saw her mother as a resource to be exploited, not a person to be loved and respected. A daughter who had mistaken your unconditional love for weakness, your generosity for obligation, your sacrifice for stupidity. I spent the second year in prison in a deep depression. Not because I felt like a victim, but because I finally understood the magnitude of what I had lost. I hadn't just lost my freedom, my house, my marriage. I had lost the only person in the world who had ever truly loved me. And I had lost her because of my own cruelty and ingratitude. During the 3rd year, I began working in more intensive rehabilitation programs, anger management classes, group therapy for white-collar criminals, empathy development programs. Slowly, I began to understand not only what I had done to you, but the impact my theft had had on your employees, on their families, on the entire community that depended on your company. I met other women who had committed similar crimes, and many of them had stories of mothers who had rescued them time and time again, who had never allowed them to face real consequences. We had all mistaken permissive love for real love. We had all hurt the people who loved us most deeply. The fourth year was different. I started helping in the programs for first-time offenders, sharing my story as a cautionary tale. I told them about how the lack of boundaries and consequences had turned me into a person incapable of gratitude, empathy, or personal responsibility. I saw in their eyes the same shock I had felt when I finally understood who I had really been. I also started writing. Not letters to you because I knew it was forbidden, but a journal where I processed everything I had learned about myself, about our relationship, about the damage I had caused. Writing became my way of making peace with myself, and with the woman I had been. Now I'm out. I live in a halfway house. I work in a bakery for minimum wage, and every single penny I earn after my basic expenses goes toward the restitution I owe you. By my calculations, it will take me about 15 years to pay you back completely, assuming I can get better jobs eventually. I'm not writing to ask for your forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm not writing to ask for a second chance, because I know I used all of my chances destroying our relationship. I'm writing so that you know that the sacrifice you made by allowing me to face the consequences of my actions was not in vain. I am a different person now. A person who understands that respect is earned with actions, not words. A person who understands that gratitude is the foundation of any healthy relationship. A person who understands that real love includes boundaries, responsibility, and mutual growth. If you ever decide to give me the chance to meet this new version of myself, I would be eternally grateful. But if you decide that it's too late, that the damage was too deep, that you need to protect your peace of mind from any possibility of me hurting you again, I will completely understand that too. What I want you to know more than anything is that I now understand what I lost. I didn't lose a mother who controlled or limited me. I lost a mother who loved me so deeply that she sacrificed her own happiness for mine for decades. I lost a mother who worked tirelessly to give me opportunities one never valued. I lost a mother who saw me as her greatest treasure, when I saw her as my biggest obstacle. And I want you to know that the woman I have become over these 4 years would have been proud to be your daughter. She would have valued every sacrifice, respected every decision, and cherished every day she could have spent with you. I am deeply sorry that I got to know her too late. Whatever your decision about our future, I want you to live the rest of your life knowing that your love was not wasted, that your sacrifices were not in vain, and that the lesson you taught me by setting boundaries finally turned me into the woman you always hoped I could be. I love you, Mom. Not as the manipulative daughter I used to be, but as the grateful woman I became, thanks to your courage to do the right thing, even when it broke your heart. Your daughter who finally grew up, Jessica. When I finished reading the letter, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of relief and, surprisingly, of maternal pride. For the first time in 28 years, Jessica had written something that sounded like the daughter I had always hoped to have. A daughter who understood the value of sacrifice, who appreciated the love she was given, who took responsibility for her actions without blaming others. Was it too late for a relationship? Could I trust that this change was real and permanent? Was it worth risking the profound peace I had found over these 4 years? I didn't know the answers to those questions. But for the first time since the day I discovered the theft, I felt that maybe, just maybe, my daughter had finally come home. I don't regret sending her to prison. I only regret not understanding sooner that kindness should never be practiced at the expense of self-destruction. That real love requires boundaries. And that sometimes, to save someone you love, you first have to save yourself. The story of Jessica and me wasn't over. But for the first time in decades, I had hoped that the next chapter would be written by 2 women who respected each other, instead of a desperate mother and an ungrateful daughter. Maybe it's never too late to learn how to love correctly.